And welcome back. Our next session is called Major Tournaments and Finals, an Opportunity for Legacy. And I would like to welcome Catherine Albany-Ward, founder of Colourblind Awareness, Patrick Gasser, head of Football and Social Responsibility at UEFA, and Paula Gabriela Freitas, from the Senior Sustainability Manager from FIFA. Thank you. So UEFA and FIFA are dedicated to creating increasingly accessible finals and tournaments. And these finals and tournaments provide a platform for greater change in the host country. In 2015, we invited UEFA and they spoke about the plans for UEFA Euro 2016. And FIFA presented its objectives for the 2018 FIFA World Cup in Russia. 3 years on, we will look at the recent changes to UEFA club competition requirements, and we will look ahead to UEFA Euro 2020, which will take place across 12 countries. We will also look back at the 2018 FIFA World Cup and at the many changes that are taking place in that country and FIFA's future plans on access and inclusion. But before we do, we're going to return to a topic that I think wowed everyone in 2015, and that was on colourblind awareness. In 2015, Catherine Albany-Ward introduced the conference delegates to the barriers and the wide impact of not making stadiums accessible for colourblind people. Since then, Colourblind Awareness has made great progress in ensuring that the 1 in 12 men and the 1 in 200 women who are colourblind are able to enjoy football like anyone else. So I'm now just going to move over to ask Catherine some questions. So since we met in October 2015, you've supported some amazing changes to the game. Could you tell us a little bit about what has happened since 2015 for us, please?
Thanks, Jo. It's been amazing what's happened in the world of colourblind people in the last 3 years. So 3 years ago, I came here. Thanks very much to Joyce Cook for inviting me to come and speak to the previous Cafe conference, because without Joyce, nothing would have happened. So at the talk here, was really lucky that I then met Patrick, and Patrick asked me to go and talk to FIFA HQ, all the nations, all the national associations, to explain to them what colourblindness was all about. And at that event, I was also presenting with Funky Awaderu of the English FA. And as a result of that meeting, the English FA decided to bid for all the hat-trick funding they could use on corporate social responsibility towards colourblindness. And that was the start of some enormous changes. So alongside UEFA and the English FA, we put together some guidance notes for football, and that covered everything to do with kick clashes, how to look after younger players at grassroots level, signage, whatever you can think of where colourblindness was affected is in that document. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's now been translated into 7 different languages, and probably the easiest place for me to refer you to it at the moment is our website, the Colourblind Awareness website, in the sports section. So if you've not seen it, I'd encourage you to have a look at that. So that was all thanks to the English FA, and also a lot of hard work from Monica Nami from UEFA, who isn't here, unfortunately. UEFA then, as well as supporting the English FA, put huge amount of effort into raising awareness with UEFA staff and introduced colourblindness to various different conferences, including stadium safety and security and coach educators, and helped us put on events at the Europa League and Champions League final fan zones. They found us an ambassador in Lars Lagerbeck, and it's been amazing. And for Colourblind Awareness Day this year, which is the 6th of September, we created 2 videos. One was where we had a young grassroots player and a former professional talking about what it was like for them playing football and being colourblind, a similar sort of poor man's version in a way of the equal game. And then we also had an infographic, and the purpose of the infographic is to raise awareness across the whole football family, parents, anybody, just to get the message out there about colour blindness. So we're just going to show that video now, and hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm here to talk about colour blindness. You see, not many people give it a thought. Why would they? But we all need to, especially in football. Colour blindness, or colour vision deficiency to give it its proper name, is the inability to see colours normally. Here's the science bit. We see colour through 3 types of specialised nerve cells called cones. These cones absorb red, blue and green light. They work together to enable us to see a full rainbow of colour. But in colour blindness, one cone cell doesn't function properly, or at all, so many colours look the same. Did you know it's one of the world's most common genetic conditions? Approximately 1 in 12 men inherit colour blindness, but only 1 in 200 women do. That's because, genetically speaking, it's carried on the X chromosome. About 300 million people worldwide have some form of colour blindness. That's equivalent to the population of the USA. But let's keep this on home ground. In the UK, there are almost 3 million colourblind people. That's enough to fill Wembley Stadium's 90,000 seats more than 30 times. Or, put another way, in a full Wembley, at least 5,500 spectators will be colourblind. So being able to see the team on the left playing in an all-red kit could be a huge issue. And it's not just spectators. Colour blindness can affect anyone involved in football. Players, management, volunteers, coaches, referees, match officials, anyone. But does it really matter? It's not a major problem, is it? Well, maybe not for you. But look at it from our perspective. There are tens of thousands of clubs in England playing football every week, with thousands of kits between them. For those with colour vision deficiency, that means plenty of opportunity for colour clashes. And it's not just the kids. It's equipment like bibs, cones, flags and line markings, facilities and signage, merchandise, accessing information like buying tickets online, and even TV coverage. It's enough to put you off having anything to do with football. But it doesn't have to be this way. If you're aware of colour vision deficiency, you can help prevent these problems in the first place. All I'm asking is that you consider colour when choosing your kit combination for your team, your football equipment, your venue, and even the information online. It's not rocket science, these are easy fixes. In fact, knowing about and making small changes like these can make a big difference to the enjoyment and involvement of people like your children, your mates, your players, and your fans. As the nation's favourite game, football has the perfect opportunity to lead the way for other sports and society in general. Now, after all that, how can you not do something?
Thank you for sharing that video. So I think from what you were saying just then, it's safe to say that a lot has happened in the past 3 years and there's been a lot of progress. You monitor a lot on social media about the feedback that you get from colourblind people. What are the main barriers that people are still talking about for colourblind people in football?
The main barriers are still kit clashes in games at all, football matches at all levels. Although there's been some progress made on that, that's still a main barrier. And also difficulty accessing information. So we get a lot of colourblind people upset that they're not sure when they're buying tickets, whether or not the tickets are available or they've all been sold out, for example. And then further information that they can have problems with is finding their way around the stadium. So those are the main barriers. And that's compounded really by the fact that we still need to raise awareness. So the more awareness we can raise using the videos and the more training we can provide to national associations and clubs, the sooner the issues will get resolved. So that's what we're aiming to do at the moment, just keep the awareness raising going.
Thank you. Now you and I have assessed many stadiums together ahead of finals. What do you think these finals represent as a legacy for colourblind people in that country? Well,
first of all, they're a fantastic opportunity to to bring the issue of colourblindness to more people, because we're going into lots of different countries and speaking not only to the national associations but the host venues and clubs, because we can have all sorts of different personalities at those meetings, and it's an opportunity to tell them about issues that lie outside of kit clashes, such as there are employees in the stadium like stewards who won't necessarily be able to understand some of their training information, and there might be emergency access signage that fans can't easily see. So it's a good chance to just talk about colourblindness in general, and having the guidance notes that are translated into so many languages has been really helpful as well.
Thank you. And just one last question. For any clubs or national associations or disabled supporters groups that want to work on this topic, what are the top 3 tips that you would give to them to make sure that they can create an inclusive game for their colourblind fans or employees?
Well, my top tip's obviously going to be kits. So for national associations, I'd say have a look at your kit guidance. And for clubs, I would say when you're considering new kits, make sure that your home and away kits are not a colourblind kit clash. So for example, not a red home team home kit and an away black kit, because both of those look the same for many types of colourblindness. And also make sure that your goalkeeper can be seen by your own players from the outfield players. And so don't let the sponsors take control of your kits. You can have a say, and that will make a big difference to colourblind people. My second tip is to review the football matchday experience from a colourblind supporter's point of view, a bit like we do with the disabled supporters matchday experience on the audits. I would say look at your processes as somebody who is colourblind would. Can they buy tickets easily online? Can they follow your wayfinding information? And once they get to the stadium, can they actually watch the match and enjoy it the same way as everybody else? And the third tip is review all of your sort of internal documentation, and remember that all employees are just as likely to be colourblind as anybody else. It's not just about fans, it's about everybody looking at any information that you provide. So think about that going forward.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And I think, yeah, like I said, you've done a lot in the past 3 years, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to come as you expand in football and go outside of football into other sports and other sectors as well. I'd now like to welcome Patrick Gasser to present to us on UEFA Euro 2020 and on club competition requirements. So thank you very much to Catherine, and welcome to Patrick.
Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Joanna, for the invitation. Thank you also, Joyce, for the mention this morning. I'd like to manage expectations today. I'm afraid I don't have a million Swiss under my sleeve to give away today. But what I'll be trying to do is give you an overview of the level of preparation for Euro 2020, already earlier on mentioned by James and Maike, and to whet your appetites for that tournament. The ambition is obviously to make the next mega event fully accessible in terms of mobility and accessibility to the stadium. Now I'd like to put this shortly into the context of the global approach of social responsibility. We look there at economic, social, environmental, and human rights impacts. In terms of health, as you may know, for those who have been to Euro 2016, we declare our tournaments tobacco-free, and this is a policy we implement across the board now, also a Champions League and UEFA club competition finals, and as you, the smokers, among yourself can imagine, this is easily or easier declared than implemented, controlled, and respected. So we would like to provide a healthy match environment on match day. Then further, we are looking at guaranteeing a full match experience, especially for disabled supporters. The basis for this are the UEFA CAFE Good Practice Guidelines. These guidelines are an integrated part of a bidding process which precedes the allocation of a tournament, and that process starts about, the lead time is about 7 years before a tournament takes place. Then in terms of transport, we hope to be able to have a combi system in place, which will mean that all supporters with a match ticket in hand should be able to use public transport in one of the 12 host cities free of charge. We will limit parking space and privilege public transport. This is also an important measure in times of climate change. Then other aspects which come into play are issues that we're looking at: sustainable energy, solar, wind, and water management. Further, waste management, reduce, repair, recycle, etc. is a key issue. Then we work continuously also with the fan embassy project, Football Supporters Europe. We are hoping to take this to a next level and be able then to work on a digital system, get away from mobile and fixed fan embassies, but going with modern times, but still be able to present a service to supporters to find their way across Europe. And last but not least, we will monitor qualification games, qualifiers for the tournament, and all games at Euro 2020 to make the tournament discrimination and race-free as far as possible. And last but not least, we had introduced in our bidding processes human rights criteria for the first time for Euro 2024. That was an aspect which was evaluated when a few weeks ago the tournament was allocated to Germany. But we'll also play a role, obviously, when we look at Euro 2020. Our aspiration is to ensure that Euro 2020 will be fully accessible, as mentioned before. We will encourage public transport, and this slide here does sort of run through the key aspects of what we are looking at. We look at accommodation, we look at accessible transport possibilities, and as mentioned before, at the free of charge public transport on match days. These are 3 topics which may interest you. It's the green mobility aspect, then the public transport as mentioned, and accessibility. So this is our mobility team who works on these key aspects throughout all 12 host cities. And just to illustrate the state of affairs since we're here, as you know, this stadium will be a venue 2020. Green mobility looks green. Free public transport is approved. There is a system for Bilbao, and accessible transport is also underway and systems in place So from that side of things, Bilbao, in terms of the host city, looks pretty promising, and we are sort of compliance level at this stage of 70%. Now this gives you the overview of 11 of the 12 host city, where we are standing on the mobility side of things and the accessibility side of things. You still have a couple of cities which are not in green. I realized when I checked this slide this morning, which I got from a colleague, that St. Petersburg is missing. It's yellow on green mobility and green on the accessible transport side of things. And this is a bit of a complicated chart, but gives you sort of an overview where we stand in terms of mobility, transport in host cities across Europe in the 12. Now I think this is the key slide of my presentation. Here we are looking at the assessment of each of the 12 host stadia and its accessibility. To the right, you have stadium capacity numbers, and then you have the benchmarking based on the UEFA CAFE guidelines. And this is actually what we would love to have. And, but then the reality of the stadiums, in spite of a bidding process which requires to provide that numbers, looks at this stage a little bit different. We have now set to the left minimum criteria with lower numbers, but with an ambition to come up and provide seats with guaranteed sidelines. The learning from Euro 2016 was that yes, we had decent numbers in terms of seats available, but then we realized during the tournament that facing persistent standing, that we ended up in a situation when many supporters in wheelchairs ended up only seeing the back of fellow supporters who stood throughout the game. And that painful experience from the disabled who went to the games, but also from our assessment, led us to the conclusion that for 2020, yes, we are aiming as much high numbers as possible, but we privilege quality over quantity. We have had a first round of stadia assessment together with CAFE, together with Healthy Stadia, and together with colorblind awareness, in order to see where we are at and what needs to be done for the future. Now again, since we are here, we're looking at the stadium of Bilbao. Has about 236 seats, of which our assessment is that none actually guarantees a sightline if we simulate persistent standing. So there is quite a bit of work for us to do here. We are looking at solution. A solution will be, for example, to kill a row or two of seats in front, or then see what can be done in order to obtain a lasting solution. What we also would like to do is leave Euro 2020, the stadiums behind, with an increased number of quality seats, rather than just block a row or two, but this takes time and investment, and I don't know how much and how far we can push this process. So these are the numbers right now on the table. We have not quite 2 years to work on this. We certainly hope for improvement in order to live up to our ambitions. And as you can see, if we go down to the level of Munich, we had 227 seats complying to our quality requirements. But then our colleagues from TV move in. They're planning for the latest technology and cameras to be put up. And then this comes sometimes, unfortunately, at the cost of seats we had in our inventory. So from 227, we are down to 188 guaranteed. So that's, for example, to illustrate the end of a process. Then if we look ahead of things to come, we are now in a process that each single time we organize a final, be it at club competition or at national teams competitions, we go through a bidding process. For the 2021 final, these are the candidates. So each of these national associations and clubs are confronted in the bidding process with the accessibility criteria, with healthy stadia criteria, with colorblind criteria. So this is also a way of spreading the message and raising awareness, and only one at the end of the day will actually then get the privilege to organize and hold the final. Equal game been presented. I think I can skip that, but just to mention that accessibility is a topic covered by the Equal Game campaign, as was explained earlier on. Short flashback, Euro 2016. I hope that at least the Portuguese among you enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patrick. It's great to hear that there are some clear learnings from Euro 2016 in terms of it not just being about numbers of seating, but making sure that they have good quality sightlines to ensure a truly inclusive experience. And we look forward to working with you over the next 2 years to making sure that Euro 2020 does ensure that it really is truly an inclusive and accessible experience for all. Euro 2020 will certainly pose some challenges, being across 12 different countries, but we also see it as an opportunity to develop larger projects around access and inclusion in those 12 countries, and to ensure that there's a greater legacy left behind in those countries. So thank you again, Patrick. We'll now move on to Paula, who's presenting from FIFA. Paula's going to talk about the extensive accessibility program that was implemented for the 2018 FIFA World Cup in Russia, and then what happens next for FIFA in this journey.
Hello, everybody. Buenas tardes a todos y a todas. It's a pleasure to be here and learn from all of you, even though I can't see any of you just because of the lights that are hitting me here. It will be my pleasure to go through this journey with you, and this is a journey that still hasn't ended. Well, actually, at the end of this particular journey, I will be taking you to lunch, so please bear with me. We're almost there. But the way that FIFA sees sustainability and also accessibility is that it is a non-ending journey. That even though we have achieved more than we have in the past, that there is still a lot more to achieve, and this is what we have in mind. So before we go to the future, I like to take a little bit of a trip with you backwards. So put on your safety belts, because we're going to go a bit into reverse now. Just to give you a little bit of context for you to understand where we have been and where we are going. The department that I work for at FIFA is the Sustainability and Diversity Department, and it was founded in 2005 as the Corporate Social Responsibility Department. So it's quite new at FIFA. And our initial focus there were on social projects, so not making our tournaments and operations sustainable, but really having external projects or parallel projects. Since then, and in 2014, really marked a milestone for FIFA in which we had a systematic approach in integrating sustainability into our tournaments. So this was done via sustainability strategies and other governance structures as well. And this began our journey in integrating the sustainability and also accessibility into our tournaments. So the past approach that we had before 2014 was that FIFA and the local organizing committee worked on accessibility, but really just looking at the local legislation, so national regulations on accessibility and making sure that those were being implemented. Today, I'm proud to say to you that the approach is a bit more complex and we have a little bit more control over it. So as FIFA Sustainability and Diversity are leading this within the organization, we do provide requirements and recommendations. We provide our colleagues within the LOC and within FIFA and all of our stakeholders support throughout the whole planning process and also the tournament. We provide training and awareness raising or train others in order for that to be done for all of the different groups that we work with. We also monitor, so we monitor before the tournament and also during the tournament, and we report. So one important aspect that I would actually like to highlight is although our department is leading the process, we are still not fully responsible. The reason why that is because we want to make sure that everybody who is working on our tournaments takes responsibility for their part. So we do work with our hospitality department in making sure that their hospitality guests that are being taken care of. Media, VIP, VVIP, volunteers, and so on. So there's a lot of interaction with all of these departments in making sure that they're also taking on their responsibility, and we're there to provide them support throughout the journey. So for 2018, we had a bit of a milestone for accessibility. The chart that, oops, and actually I forgot to speak about the photos, so I'll be doing that from now on. Apologies for that. So what you see on the slide before you is a graph of the objectives that FIFA had for 2018 within our sustainability strategy. So this was in the social, environmental, and economic spheres. And here you see that we have inclusivity and equality as one of the main pillars of the work that we implemented. Now, as Patrick, I think UEFA and FIFA are quite aligned. We also work in other spheres, so we do work in climate change, in offsetting all of our emissions. We implemented a very comprehensive recycling program at our tournaments, not only for 2018, but for others as well. And also, we have established for 2018 a very comprehensive monitoring of decent work conditions for construction workers. If I have whet your appetite for any of these topics, you can access the sustainability strategy on FIFA.com, and early next year you will also be able to access our sustainability report for this tournament. But again, what I want to highlight here is that inclusivity and equality is a part of a bigger process that we have implemented for this tournament. It's not something that's a nice to have, that it's on the side, but it is really something that is systematic, that is taken into considerations throughout all of the phases and by all of our stakeholders. 2018, we also had another big milestone in which FIFA used a set of handbooks, especially for the local organizing committee, for them to understand how they should implement the tournament. So we, together with CAFE, who has been with us from before the beginning, actually, worked together on accessibility requirements that were put into a legally obliging document by the Russians on accessibility, and this was included in the Stadium Requirements Handbook. We also included accessibility requirements and best practices, so recommendations, into the Sustainability Projects and Services Handbook, and in a number of other handbooks as well. As I said, making sure that our colleagues also took responsibility. So accessibility was included in 12 other operational and strategic handbooks. We also had a number of other mechanisms that we worked with, again, just to make sure that this was integrated fully from the beginning. So that included our strategy, which I have already mentioned, having an accessibility procedure that had the feedback in and the sign-off by several other functional areas. So and also a number of other procedures, including security procedures on how do you check disabled fans that are coming into the stadium, how do you check their vehicles, and so on, just to give you a bit of an example. We also developed training materials and training for key groups. We've integrated accessibility into manuals and operational documents, for example, our FIFA FanFest manuals and also our transportation requirements. We worked together. Joanna and I have traveled all of Russia, minus 26 degrees in Kazan, I will never forget. Auditing all of the stadiums to ensure that when the tournament began, they were going to be as accessible as possible. Working with the stadium authorities and the Russians on the ground. And as I have said as well, CAFE has been there from the start. I would like to point that any of the success that we have had for this tournament is really in due part due to CAFE and all of the support that they have provided us. They have been there from the requirements all the way until the very end. When they did not know information, they were able to go and find that information and provide it to us. And I think that it was not only a learning experience for us, but also for CAFE in order to learn more fully on how to actually integrate accessibility into such a mega event like the FIFA World Cup. We also had dedicated staff to accessibility at the stadiums, and I'll share with you a few of those numbers as we move ahead. So I just wanted to show you how much we have actually pushed ahead since the last two FIFA World Cups. So in 2010, and here you have a photo of the 2010 mascot waving at us. We had an audio descriptive commentary project, and in regards to the environment, we followed the country-specific legislations. 2014, here you have a photo of blind fans holding up signs. who were able to take advantage and use the audio descriptive commentary services that we provide in 4 of the FIFA World Cup stadiums. So only 4 out of the 12 had that service. So for 2014, we had ad hoc monitoring of the stadiums. There were special access seats that were implemented according to local requirements. There was accessible parking made available, and that was in great part because of the transportation department from the local organizing committee, because according to Brazilian legislation, that was not needed to be provided. As I mentioned already, we also had an audio descriptive commentary project that we implemented with CAFE and a local organization in Brazil called URESI. We had a wheelchair escort service, and here I'd like to take a pause. This was the first time that we provided a wheelchair escort service at a tournament. And from that we saw, well, this is actually a great service that we should include in the future. So from a best practice, that became a requirement for 2018. So it just goes to show you how we really pay attention to what is being offered and learning from our past mistakes and also successes in order for us to make those requirements in the future. We developed training on accessibility etiquette and also provided that. And also something that I'm quite proud of is that we worked with our human resources department and our volunteers department in order for them to recruit disabled people into the staff that would be working in the venues and also in HQ. Oops. Oh, and here we have a video. Pavel, who was our accessibility monitor at one of the stadiums in Moscow. Pavel, your beautiful face is now on camera, and if we could just put that video, please. FIFA has an accessibility program for the tournament because it is a part of our sustainability strategy for the 2018 FIFA World Cup. And we believe that we need to make our tournaments available to everybody, accessible to all, including disabled people and people with limited mobility. The types of measures that we have taken for this tournament to make it more accessible is a spectators' accessibility guide to help them from the point of entry into the country all the way to the stadium. We have also made available 4 types of easy access tickets for spectators. We have made available accessible food and beverage concessions. We have trained volunteers, spectators, and a number of other staff. We have ensured that there is an adequate number of accessible toilets available. We have made available as well parking areas and shuttle services within the stadium.
Everything that the disabled person needs is here, is nearby. For example, here are the seats, and I'm happy that the railways are really low and you can enjoy the game fully, and the stadium is really accessible, and I can't wait to enjoy this game.
We started working on this perhaps about 5 years ago, working with the stadiums, working with the stadium authorities, with our partners within FIFA and the LOC as well, so that all of the other teams could also incorporate this into their way of thinking and their planning.
Аудиодескрипция – это процесс, технология точнее, которая позволяет мне точно так же воспринимать футбол, как и вы, но не через глаза, а через уши. То есть я беру специальный приемник с наушником, и в этот приемник человек, который является профессиональным футбольным комментатором, рассказывает обо всем, что происходит на поле. То есть таким образом я, находясь на стадионе в качестве болельщика, могу находиться наравне с вами.
In many cases, what we have to do is make do with what is available to us. So whenever we find that the person's journey is not going to be accessible, we had to find ways around it to try to make it accessible. And that's where we had to come up with these ramps throughout the stadium. An indicator of our success is if you go to the stadiums and you see the hundreds of disabled spectators that are enjoying the match. So it's definitely been a success. So as we go to the next slide, just to say for those who missed the Russian portion of it, that was Pavel, who is actually here with us today, speaking about the audio descriptive commentary service that was offered at the stadium. So just speaking a little bit more about the infrastructure and the services that I mentioned in the video. Again, the most important part for us to begin on a very good foot was the establishment of requirements. And this was done for infrastructure, temporary infrastructure as well, signage and services. We monitored all of these requirements over a period of 3 to 4 years. And this was done at the stadiums and other tournament sites, and also at other event sites. So before the World Cup, we actually have a series of hundreds of events, and we really focus on the bigger ones like the draws, the congresses, the dinners that went along with these stadiums, with these events to make them as accessible as possible. We created internal working groups within FIFA and the LOC to focus on this topic. We had, as I mentioned, the participation from CAFE. We had tournament staff, accessibility monitors. As I mentioned, Pavel is one of them, and he is here with us today. And we also had spectator surveys. Just as a note from one of the previous panels that we had, really receiving feedback is very important. I believe that it's 8% of all of the disabled people and people with limited mobility that attended our tournaments. We were able to receive their feedback during the tournament. And this was all compiled by CAFE, back of house. This information was sent to FIFA within 24 hours. This information was then sent to the stadium and sustainability venue team at each one of the stadiums in order for that feedback to be taken into consideration before the next match occurred. The same thing happened as well with the accessibility monitors that we had. Accessibility monitors were present at the first 2 matches at each one of the stadiums, and then also at the 2 semifinals. For the feedback that we were not able to incorporate into the tournament itself, we have taken note of this. This is in a final report that we have, and all of these suggestions and recommendations that we saw of things that did not work are being considered for our future tournaments. Not only FIFA World Cups, but the other tournaments that FIFA also organizes. We also had the establishment of an accessibility working group in Russia. So I've seen a few of you around. I've seen Evgeny, Elena here in front of us. Perspectiva is here with us. So a huge thank you to all of you as well. And as I have mentioned before, your recommendations and your feedback was extremely important to us. And everything that you have fed back to us that has not yet been incorporated, mostly due to a question of timing, we have listened to you, and we are going to be taking those recommendations forward. Spectators Accessibility Guide, it was published in, there's something going on here with there's a poltergeist in the system. So as we figured that out, I'll just speak a little bit about the Accessibility Spectators Guide. It was published in Russian and in English. It spoke about the whole journey of the spectator. It was sent to all of special access ticket holders and made available on FIFA.com. I know that CAFE also made that available. And it was also distributed to all of the relevant event staff. Again, making sure that our colleagues also took responsibility and know what kinds of services were being offered so that they could make their teams aware of this as well. There was a section on infrastructure and services offered at each one of the stadiums, and a section on host cities as well, focusing on all travel aspects from the airport all the way to the seat of the stadium. So just to speak a little bit about the different services and infrastructure that was offered in the stadiums. Here we have a picture of three photos associated with parking. One is a parking space where you see that it is clearly demarcated with the barriers around it for safety reasons. And then the other two pictures are those of a signage so that people know where these accessible parking areas were. So we made available on a first come, first serve parking at each one of the stadiums. We also made available shuttle services and resting areas and support from key transport points and parking. So the first photo that you have is of a host city volunteer. So we had the FIFA World Cup volunteers, but outside of the perimeter in the last mile, we also had the support of the host city's volunteers that were there dedicated as well for accessibility. So here you have a photo of one of the host city volunteers speaking with one of the disabled fans in order to provide them information on how to reach the public transportation. We also had two different types of shuttles. So you have two photos of two different types of vehicles. One is a golf buggy that was used within the internal perimeter, and one was vehicles that actually can go on roads, and those were offered by host cities if the parking and if the public transportation was more than 50 meters away. In most cases. There were some cases in which this was not always done. Our requirements was that you could either offer shuttle services or resting areas. So some of the stadiums did choose the resting areas. There was also the development of messages and signage. So here you have a photo of a lift with the universal accessibility signage on top, and this is from Spartak. And the reason why I put this here is because at the first match, that sign was on the side of the lift, and we had some pretty tall volunteers that were standing there, so their heads was right in front of the sign. So we were able to see that, and during the tournament, we actually changed the signage for it to be on top of the lift for it to be more visible. So all of these changes took place during the tournament as well. You have a second photo of signage pointing to the lift, and this was in Luzhniki. And I'm sorry to say that this signage actually came in quite late. Even though we had ordered it months and months before, I believe it only came before the second to last match in Luzhniki. But it was there, and it was great because it did point to the lift that people could use. You also had signage that pointed to other lifts as well in order to facilitate the journey of disabled fans. The next slide, we're speaking of accessible routes. So we focused on the distances that had to be traveled, on any obstructions, on ramps that could facilitate the journey, on lifts and stairs and on all of those requirements, security gates and ticket turnstiles, making sure that those were available and in the number that we needed them to be available in. I agree, definitely, that an accessible event is not only about the seating alone, as was mentioned in the previous panel, but we did have wheelchair user places, easy access standard seats, amenity seats, and extra width seats. And we also provided companion seats for all of those categories except for the easy access extra width seats. And here we have three photos. One is of a platform, a wheelchair user platform. It's actually a photo from the FIFA Confederations Cup in 2017, but it's such a great photo, I wanted to include it. Then you also have another photo of another platform, which I don't remember where that's from. And the last photo is of a ramp that leads you to the wheelchair user platform. And as you can see, that ramp, Joanna, has the barriers. And when Joanna was there last, there were no barriers. So we really had to push the stadium to implement this. This was in Saransk. I was in Saransk about 2 weeks before the tournament began, and all of them were up. But we did have our sustainability stadium manager there who really pushed for it all to be installed. So it's definitely, it's a small point to you perhaps, but for us it's a lot of effort that went in for these small details to be implemented. On the next slide, we have a great group of volunteers. The one in the middle with the red cap is Natalia in St. Petersburg. These were volunteers that were dedicated at accessibility info points at each one of the stadiums. There were at least 2 of these accessibility info points, and they were trained on accessibility etiquette to provide services for disabled fans and fans with limited mobility. We had the wheelchair escort service, which now for 2018 was a requirement and not just a best practice, as it was in Brazil. We had accessible toilets, and Morgan and Stephen, I heard you, we're going to be working on those changing places toilets as well. We had low-level counters for food and beverage concessions, and we had platforms at merchandise concessions. We tried to have low-level counters at the merchandise concessions, but there was a bit of resistance there. So we came up with another solution in having a platform so people that could access the merchandise concessions. Not all of them, there were a few at each of the stadiums. Accessible ticketing and accreditation centers as well. And audio descriptive commentary project. Now, as you could remember, in Brazil, we only had it in Portuguese at 4 of the stadiums. For Russia, we had it in Russian at all of the stadiums, and we had it in English in 2 of the main stadiums, Luzhniki and St. Petersburg. We also had disabled volunteers who were able to participate in the event in another capacity. The second and last photo in this slide is of the wheelchairs that were made available for an escort program at each one of the stadiums. Perhaps if I could have a raise of hands of how many saw the photo of Cristiano Ronaldo with the wheelchair user escort. This was for the FIFA Confederations Cup in 2017, a few of you. According to Joyce, this was actually the 2nd most viewed photo in FIFA's history. So it's again to speak about what UEFA was talking about earlier, that this topic really resonates with a lot of people. So McDonald's, we at Sustainability and Diversity had spoken about this in the past, but McDonald's really took a forefront on this. Is McDonald's here with us today? No, it's a shame. So McDonald's, who actually sat in the accessibility working group that we created, really pushed this forward and, again, gave a face and really rose awareness in regards to disability by including disabled escorts in their program. And then the other photo is one that had not been seen as much, but it's of another little boy who was also a part of the escort program. So I believe that it was at least 1 match or 1 or 2 matches in each one of the stadiums that had disabled escorts, which are children that lead each one of the players into the pitch. We also had the FIFA Foundation Festival. Some of you here, I know, participated in the FIFA Foundation Festival that took place in Russia. And this was, perhaps some of you might know it as a Football for Hope Festival. And here we have a picture of one of the participants of the tournament who is kicking the football into the net. He was fierce. People really did not want to play with him because he had a lot of force. And I believe they actually won. I don't remember. Don't quote me on this. But this was, I believe, the first time that we incorporated several organizations into the FIFA Foundation Festival that were disabled or that worked with disabilities. So for those of you who do not know, FIFA, the FIFA Football for Hope program worked with organizations throughout the world, organizations that use the power of football to have social change. So now this, we were also able to have this festival during the FIFA World Cup in 2018. There were a number of other programs as well under the FIFA football, the Football for Hope program, which included the Football for Hope Adidas Exchange program, which I know that Downside Up participated in. I'm not sure if Downside Up is here with us today. But these are parallel projects that we implemented to the tournament. We're getting to the end. We're almost at the end of our journey, so just bear with me a little bit more. Some of the success factors for us. Integration in sustainability strategy and our management system. So again, just having accessibility as a nice to have, or just having it as an introduction to a few of the activities, we did this before, but we really immersed ourselves in 2018 in making this a bigger part of the work that we implement for the tournament. Collaboration with CAFE, as I have already mentioned, the collaboration and allocation of responsibilities to the other functional areas. Don't try to do it alone. This is a big project that you definitely need the buy-in of everybody within your organization. And then I like to practice a little bit of my Russian, which I haven't for a while. So, upurstuva. How is that, Elena? It's good? Okay, upurstuva. We need it. It's persistence. I have gotten a persistence line on my face here. So I'm pointing to a line that I have on the left side of my mouth. This is the result of upurstuva. We really had to be persistent in order to implement this project. So you really need to keep with it and really force people in different ways. You can force people slightly or with in many different ways, through your leadership from the down up, in order for this project really to have been a success. And in addition to upurstuva, we also needed flexibility. We had the sustainability team in all of the 12 stadiums. There were 17 staff members allocated to sustainability, but between 70 and 80% of their time was dedicated to accessibility. We also had 76 volunteers trained and dedicated and monitored accessibility from at least 2 weeks before the tournament began all the way up until the last match of that stadium. We had spectator services who were amazing with us. They also dedicated 12 staff members from their team and 327 volunteers dedicated to accessibility. There were also 61,000 staff, volunteers, concession staff, stewards, trained on accessibility etiquette in order to make the experience as pleasant as possible for everyone. So 94% of all of the special access tickets that we made available were actually allocated. There might be a few percentages off here and there, still pending final reconciliation. This is a huge success out of all of the seats that we made available. And here you have the numbers across all 12 stadiums. You had 10,746 wheelchair user places allocated, 12,552 easy access seats allocated, and 18,102 companion seats allocated throughout the whole stadium. Oh, and I'm forgetting about the pictures. Oh, and this is an important picture that I wanted to show you guys because I'm Brazilian, and here you have a group of Brazilian fans. This was in the beginning of the tournament, when they were excited. Do you actually know the difference between Brazilian fans and all of the other fans? They're excited in the beginning and even at the end if we lost, because they were just as excited going on throughout Russia, throughout the whole tournament. But this is actually in the beginning, and it's a photo of a Russian wheelchair user who took a photo with them and the World Cup trophy that they had in hand. You also have here on the next slide a picture of a fan, also a wheelchair user, Russian, who visited at least 3 of the stadiums. And because my boss is Argentinian, I felt compelled that I had to include a photo of Argentina, even though I did not want to. But you do have a photo of an Argentinian fan with the Argentinian flag, of course, who did not have a wheelchair user ticket. He came to the stadium with a non-SAT ticket, and what we had to do, given the experience that we had from the FIFA Confederations Cup a year before, we developed a contingency process. So fans who came to the stadium and had a disability and could not be sat where their ticket was, we were able to swap their tickets for them to have a better experience. So, Patrick, this goes to show you that we're also not discriminating, even against Argentinian fans. We gave them a good place to sit. As I mentioned before, 8% of all disabled spectators and spectators with limited mobility were surveyed on their whole journey at the stadiums by our volunteers, and that's 1,872 fans that we surveyed. The results that we received, that overall their satisfaction rate was 4.8 out of 5. Now, I've been speaking a lot about the stadiums, but there's other aspects of the tournament which I'm not going to be able to get to, but I just wanted to speak to you a little bit about the FIFA Fan Fest. Who has ever been to a FIFA Fan Fest? Raise your hand. It's fun, right? It's a great experience. So this is for people who were not able to get tickets, mostly. You are able to go to a place where all of the fans are congregated with a giant screen, music, entertainment, food, so you can get a bit of the experience of the FIFA World Cup for free, right? Which is great for all of us. We also worked on the FIFA Fan Fest project. So we developed and presented requirements for this project, and this is a project that is implemented by the host cities. It's not implemented by FIFA. So we also worked with the host cities on this. We reviewed their plans. We ensured that they had provision of parking for disabled guests. There was installation of seating for disabled people and people with limited mobility across all of the 12 FIFA Fan Fest. There was installation of ramps, availability of low counters at concessions and the commercial displays, and also the installation of ramps, which I already mentioned, but of temporary firm grounding. A lot of these fans, like for example, in Brazil, we had the FIFA Fan Fest in Copacabana Beach. So it was very flimsy grounding. So we learned from that experience and made sure that firm grounding was made available for disabled people. And here you have two photos. One photo is great. It's a huge sign pointing to a counter that is has a low counter for disabled fans. And the second photo is one of a ramp that leads from the entrance into the FIFA Fan Fest site. Other developments at FIFA. We have included disability within our FIFA statutes. For a question of timing, I'm not going to read the whole statute, but you could find it, and you can also speak to us for us to speak a little bit more about it. And also, as we're moving forward, there is a development of a systematic approach, not into infrastructure, policies, and procedures, not only for our tournaments, but for our business operations as institutionally. So we are now not moving away from the tournaments, but going beyond the tournaments and really looking as FIFA and how we can make our business more accessible as well. So, in the requirements that we received from CAFE, a few of you have spoken about accessibility officers at the stadiums. Well, we also have this in our requirements for all of the 12 stadiums. And 4 years ago, what we thought, well, we cannot ask the stadiums to have an accessibility officer if we do not have one. So 4 years in the making, we have Hala here with us. I call her Hala, 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 because we're going to need 3 of her to do everything that we want. So Hala, if you could just stand quickly as well so people can see you. Are you standing? There you are. You could stay standing. You could stay standing. Next to her, you have Delphine, and here we're already looking at the future of what we're doing at FIFA. So Delphine, please stand. Don't be shy. Delphine, who's part of the LOC sustainability team. She has a team working with her locally. She's the one who implemented the accessibility program for the FIFA Women's Under-20 World Cup this year in France, and will be responsible for the Women's World Cup next year. We also have Melanie that Joyce pointed out to, and also looking really more in the future, we have Samantha and a few of her colleagues from the Supreme Committee from Qatar. So Samantha, if you could stand, and as well if your colleagues from Qatar could also stand. So thank you so much. So please feel free to speak to all of these people. You know, 3 years ago when FIFA was here, it was just Madeleine standing before you and with you. Madeleine Noraish, a colleague of mine from FIFA. And as you can see here, FIFA is completely committed to this theme of of accessibility. Not only people from FIFA are here, but people from the host countries that we're having our events are also available as well. And now we have someone who's going to be focusing in FIFA, not only on our tournaments, but also as how we are as a business working on accessibility and diversity. So we're really going to be looking at building upon our successes and aiming for more. We are not satisfied with what we have done. We know that there's still a lot of road to travel, and it is a non-ending road. We will continue to go on this journey, and hopefully together with a lot of you. We will be updating our requirements for the FIFA World Cup and development of requirements for our other tournaments as well. We've already started doing this for the men's under-20 competition, which will be taking place in Poland next year as well. So we've developed accessibility requirements for that tournament. We are going to be working on improving our ticketing portal. Again, I've listened to everything that you have said so far, and we're going to be taking those lessons back to Zurich to discuss how we can move forward with this. And as I said, not only working on our biggest tournament, but also at other tournaments as well. For the FIFA Women's World Cup in France, we're lucky to have Delphine here with us. We are already not with Joanna, but Delphine and I have traveled a lot already throughout all of France, doing an audit of all of the 9 stadiums, ensuring that there is going to be the availability of special access tickets, policies and procedures, and an accessibility spectator's guide. Delphine and her team worked on an accessibility spectator's guide for the tournament, the under-20 tournament that took place in France this year. It is on FIFA.com if you'd like to take a look. And also our guide for 2018 is also on FIFA.com. With that, I thank you. I know it was a very long presentation, but it's very exciting for us to have traveled this far with many of you, and we look forward to becoming more and more accessible as we move ahead.
So I'll just repeat that. Thank you very much, Paolo. It was really good to see the detail of that extensive accessibility program in Russia and the journey that you took to get to that point. I'm also delighted that you are taking this further now, that you're working across other tournaments and that you have appointed Hala within your team, who I'm sure will do a great job of extending accessibility across different areas of FIFA. We now have some time before lunch for any questions that you would like to ask to any of the panel members here today. So there should be a roaming mic around if anyone would like to raise a question. So there's one just over here.
Vielen Dank. Eine kurze, spezielle Frage. Wie wurde das ganze Thema in Russland zum Beispiel, ich sage jetzt mal, da spielt Deutschland gegen Mexiko in Moskau, und wie wurde die Blindenreportage dort sichergestellt, dass man als russischer, als deutscher und als mexikanischer Fan das Ganze erleben konnte?
So I think the question was, how did you prepare for the Germany-Mexico match in the World Cup? But I didn't quite get the whole translation. So there was audio descriptive commentary in Spanish and German as well for that match, which I'm not sure FIFA was aware of. So maybe we can pick that up after in the break to discover more about that. Has anyone got another question? There's one at the front here with Pavel. Oh, okay, there we go. Pavel's going to answer for us. If we just give you the mic, Pavel, it's coming. No. It's Pavel. No.
I'm absolutely sure that on match Mexico and Germany was audio description only in English and only in Russian. There was no only audio description on Germany or on Spanish languages.
Yeah, so maybe we can pick that up to discover a little bit more after in the break. Yeah, we would like to. It would be good to know. Any other questions at all from the audience? There's one at the front here.
Thank you. Crystal Sogenbits from Estonia. So we heard about very much about wheelchair accessibility and this kind of accessibility, what is very, very good. But do you have anything put onto paper about guide dogs and assistance dogs? Because we had some problems at the World, at the Super Cup.
Could you just clarify who that question is to?
To FIFA.
FIFA, okay, thank you. So it's on if there's provisions for guides and assistance dogs.
Okay, well, first, I'm sorry to hear that you or someone else had difficulties with guide dogs at the World Cup. In our requirements, there is the possibility of entering with a guide dog. And we also ensure that this was in the stadium code of conduct as well. So the stadium code of conduct is public information for everyone who has purchased a ticket, so you know what your rights are. And in the stadium code of conduct, it indicates that you have you may bring a guide dog in to assist you. The only information that I have was that there was only one guide dog at the World Cup in, I forgot the stadium now, but in any case. But I would be interested to find out what difficulties you had so that we could definitely take that into consideration in the future.
Thank you very much. Like we were saying earlier, it's really, really important to raise these points because it helps us to ensure that everyone can enjoy the matchday experience at these finals. So I think Holger had a question next. That will be translated by his sign language interpreter.
Also es wurde sehr, sehr, sehr viel organisiert für Rollstuhlfahrer, für Blinde. Dafür wurde jetzt sehr, sehr viel berichtet. Für Gehörlose waren nicht so viele Beiträge und ich habe, gibt es vielleicht spezielle Tickets für Gehörlose, Bereiche für Gehörlose, Dolmetscher für Gehörlose, kann man alles verfolgen als Gehörloser und zum Beispiel wie in Schweden, als ich das gesehen habe, das hat mich stark beeindruckt und ich würde mich sehr freuen, wenn sich sowas bei weltweiten Veranstaltungen auch durchsetzen kann. Das war sehr beeindruckend. The sign language translator on the screen, permanent and for all.
Is this something they
World Championship is in the stadium, and the translator of the sign language translator can see.
So I think the question was around there are lots of services that can be provided for differently disabled people. We saw earlier this morning from Hakan around sign language interpretation for deaf and hard of hearing people at matches. And I think the question is around whether this kind of service can be available for major tournaments. So if I let both Patrick and Paula answer this question.
Thanks, Joanna. Thanks for the question. In terms of ticketing, I would have to ask back to Joanna if hard hearing is part of the disability proof for special ticketing, so she's nodding, so that's part of that. I think on the other hand, nothing would prevent you to apply for an able-bodied ticket. Increases your chances. I think you could probably go both ways. We have no plans in store at all to have the type of Swedish translation service as proposed, but that's an interesting approach.
This is something that we are going to be considering as now we take up the requirements for future tournaments. I hope you'll be happy to know that we have worked as well with our FIFA TV colleagues who are responsible for the messages that are given to all spectators in the stadium. So this is through the infotainment, the giant screen. Before the tournament, we did speak to them about what additional kinds of services that we could offer. This wasn't something that we were not able to provide for the 2018 FIFA World Cup cycle, but it is something that we're definitely going to address now as we're working on the requirements for the future tournaments. To let you know, in case you don't, there are a few services available on FIFA.com. In some of the commentary, I believe, again, don't quote me on this, but perhaps it was at least one video per day that was on FIFA.com did have sign language interpretation as well. And I think that that was the highlights video. So I know it's not exactly what you're speaking of, but again, it's definitely something that we will be taking up.
So that's all we've got time for. I'm sure you're all very, very hungry and looking forward to some Spanish or Basque food. So thank you very much to the panelists for giving up your time today and sharing all this information. And if anyone does have any further questions, I'm sure you'd be happy to answer during the breaks. So thank you very much. The lunch will be served just further behind the stage, so if you need any assistance in directions or getting there, please do ask the cafe staff and volunteers. You can leave your headsets on your seats. We just need you to hand them in at the end of the day so they can be recharged ahead of tomorrow. And we'll come back for 2:30. Thank you.